Hello, dear friends. We are sincerely glad to greet you again. And today we are going to talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video we touched upon the phenomenon of the ALLATRA movement. And you spoke with such warmth about the ALLATRA movement participants, about real volunteers, true volunteers, who are driven by love for their fellow human beings and by truly the highest goals. And everyone very much remembered the moment when you said that if 1 million people are taken and the ALLATRA movement participants are placed among them at any distance, even if blindfolded, one can unmistakably identify who is where, because this is conditioned by the inner potential of life within them, by the power of real, which is actually capable of working miracles in this world. You know, those miracles sort of really occur. The ALLATRA movement participants are also volunteers for the Creative Society project. And you know, when people from the outside analyze and evaluate the projects that are implemented within the framework of the Creative Society project, conferences, forums, roundtables, and social activity, they really wonder how it is possible in general that ordinary volunteers, without any financial injections or investments, do much more and do something that large famous companies and specialized supranational corporations cannot afford, while the latter are actually supposed to engage in that. You know, what is surprising is the professionalism of these people, the scale of the projects that take place, and most importantly, this courage and determination to tell the truth and to walk very steadfastly towards the goal. To the goal, a very lofty goal, the goal of saving humanity, so that all people would not just survive in this world, but would live, I dare say, like in paradise probably, like in Eden, so that this world would be Eden on this earth. And you know, when you talk to participants of the ALLATRA movement, they say that they themselves are very much surprised at the resulting product, as far as forums and conferences are concerned, that they seem to be simply doing their work selflessly, meticulously, and most importantly, with a very high quality. And afterwards, they are simply amazed at the results, and these results greatly exceed any expectations. They indeed receive and see the fruits of this work. And you know, Igor Mikhailovich, in the consumerist format, it is very hard for people to understand how, without expecting gratitude, some kind of honor, or financial incentives, people can act together in such a friendly, cohesive way, precisely for the benefit of one another. In fact, those people who are inside the movement do not fully see and understand either how it all happens in general, how such results appear, what the power of the ALLATRA movement is, what the phenomenon of the ALLATRA movement is, and why the ALLATRA movement is so efficient. So here's a question for you, Igor Mikhailovich. In your opinion, what is actually the power of the ALLATRA movement, and what is the phenomenon of ALLATRA?
The power is in the truth, and the phenomenon is in unity. This is really so. But you didn't even say the most important thing that not everyone remarks, but everyone notices. What is going on at ALLATRA? Let's explain in a way that would make it clear to our friends what we are talking about. All over the world, everywhere, people are divided. We are all different in terms of skin color, social status, languages. We are divided in everything, in general. We are divided into countries. Each of us has our own mentality. We have our own laws, our own traditions. We are different. We are split up even where we are supposed to be a single whole. Even within one state, we are divided into many groups, right?
Yes, exactly.
Isn't that true, friends? So, at ALLATRA, when people are really involved, are true people of ALLATRA, they note that there are no divisions. It all disappears somewhere. There is one and the same mentality, one and the same understanding, and it's very easy for people to communicate with each other wherever they may be, let's say all over the world, and that's the most interesting phenomenon. Why? Because all people, the people of ALLATRA, develop a single mentality of God's love. There is nothing better. And all those Shaitan's mindsets just fall off like husks. This is the most remarkable thing. And then, of course, opportunities also open up because people act not for themselves. They don't expect profit or anything else. They do it all for people, for other people, and again, in serving God's world. What can be better? That's why everything works out.
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, you've said and very clearly pointed out that there are no mentalities. For example, during one of the meetings, participants of the ALLATRA movement, actually at various offline or online meetings, when they meet and discuss projects, they know that they suddenly realize that there is really no difference in mentality. Because after all, the participants are from different countries, with different cultures, with different ideologies in the countries, and so on. And if initially, when they just started working on projects, some issues could have slipped through, afterwards, suddenly at some point, they clearly realized that there is no difference in mentalities. And I recall that nowadays humanity has a dream, for example, to go into that very outer space.
Well, yes.
And a lot of ground-based projects are conducted that simulate the conditions when a person needs to be in space for a long time. And I was also struck by the fact that the key problem is actually not in some technical aspect, but precisely in the aspect of interaction between people themselves. A problem is that people of different mentalities meet, and even if people have the same mentality, as in the project Biosphere 2, when they encountered their first difficulties, they moved apart and even stopped looking into each other's eyes.
Do you understand why this happens? I'll try to explain. They gathered, like scorpions in a jar. Why? Because egoists and proudlings were gathered, placed in one room, and they must stay together for a long time. They have neither a common goal nor aspiration or desire, nothing in common except money. Money and fame. That's all. That's all they were united on. Yet, can you expect a result from such a group? There will be no positive result. There will be separation. We talked about this many times. Shaitan divides. He will divide 3 people. He will make 2 people quarrel. It is Shaitan. That's his function. The struggle for dominance. The struggle for alpha. Who is smarter and who rules over whom? Again, we shouldn't forget that the one who has a little more power begins to dominate, right? And for people, let's say, to stay 2 years in a confined space, which is actually what long-distance space travels imply. It's a disaster. Why? Because the same people, well, it's a nightmare. Whereas for the people of ALLATRA, it is happiness. For them, it's not a problem. Why? Because there is a common goal and a common cause.
I remember you once said if they were close for 2 years,
Yes.
they would come out of there being angels.
Of course. They would fly out of there. Imagine it's really a freebie. You see, you cannot think of anything better. You are sort of doing a good thing, yet at someone else's expense. But at the same time, you have tremendous opportunities to gain life as a group. That's really awesome.
Igor Mikhailovich, participants also know that when this unity actually occurs, there is always this kind of victory. Because together, people will surely find some solutions that they cannot find on their own. They are like the puzzle pieces of a single mechanism. And indeed, as I already said, they themselves are surprised at the results that occur. And most interestingly, the more people join the Creative Society project and the ALLATRA movement, the easier it is somehow for them to synchronize.
Of course.
And you understand that if for the consumerist format a huge number of people is a big problem, that you have to somehow organize them and somehow manage them, then in this case, there is some kind of a self-organizing mechanism.
In this case, it is quite the opposite. Certainly. And why is it that for ALLATRA and for the Creative Society, the more there are people, the better. Really better. Again, Let's consider people's influence, even on technical development, and we will see this correlation.
Right.
It's a certain pattern. The more people there are on our planet, the more technologically literate we become. The more inventions we make and our capabilities expand. Nowadays, well, what do we possess nowadays? What do we have that is good? Everything. Let's put it so, including airplanes, ships, electronics, and we have already come to virtual reality, although we haven't mastered natural reality yet, but still, right? I mean, the capabilities are marvelous. And can you imagine if there were 50 billion of us? Capabilities would be tremendous in general. Although we are not talking about classified technology so far, which in no way may be implemented in the consumerist format because they destroy it. While in the creative society, they will only bring benefits, so...
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, when you once shared this information that the greater the population number is on the planet, the greater the technological development advances, in fact. Then I wanted very much to look at this correlation, how it is actually in history. Indeed, you know when...
There is a very clear pattern.
It's amazing how within less than 150 years, how much we have evolved technically, in fact.
We have leaped. Wait, not only technically, but we have increased in number.
Right.
And it all absolutely correlates with each other.
There is a direct correlation.
100%.
If before the population reached 1 billion, people used a plow. Already at 1 billion, a tractor appeared. When there were 2 billion, there were already computers. And an atomic bomb appeared too. Then, if I remember correctly, when the population was 3 billion, people went into outer space. GPS satellites emerged at 4 billion.
Of course.
And the internet appeared at 5 billion. Whereas now we are basically living in the age when research in nanotechnology and virtual reality are already underway. But still, Igor Mikhailovich, there is the following question. We understand perfectly well that in the consumerist format, science is restrained.
Certainly.
So yes, there are already very serious technologies nowadays, where we ourselves can be surprised at how quickly we have come to them. However, with such a large population and such a kind of united potential, we could probably do a lot more if...
We could. If it were a creative society, we surely could. But the thing is, we exist in the consumerist format, and many technologies are simply concealed from us. We cannot develop them.
Who benefits from this?
The system. Again. And those who actively support the consumerist format. Everything is very simple. I'll put it as follows. It's the most beneficial for the system itself. Why? Because when a civilization is formed, people begin to advance very fast, not only technically, but also spiritually. Opportunities appear, and truth begins to sound, the real truth, which enables people to gain life. Hence, what happens? We generate a certain energy, we improve our own lives, we enhance not just the quality of our existence, I'll put it this way, but we increase our spiritual potential. Hence, we give less to the system. That's not profitable for it. That is why it interferes in our life, so to say. But again, it interferes at the level of whispering with its promptings, but not directly. Unfortunately, yes, many people listen to the system. And there happens what happens. But nevertheless, still, the more there are people, the more we discover, and our opportunities expand. Imagine what kind of opportunities humanity will have when there will be 50 billion here in the creative society. It is, at least, the second stage of evolutionary development. It's already free energy, not just some fuel-free generators, but serious opportunities. Even today's science fiction writers haven't invented and haven't been able to describe such opportunities that a human being will be endowed with.
So these are completely different energies.
Of course.
And the opportunity for people to go beyond this sphere, first of all, right?
Going beyond this sphere implies being between the first and the second. Yes, between the first and the second stages of civilization development. That's already an exit beyond the sphere. The second stage already gives an opportunity of going beyond, let's say, the galaxy, meaning beyond the greater sphere.
You know, even during the last 200 years, some ideas and solutions connected with free energy actually emerged as well. But they couldn't be implemented because there were not enough of us. Or what?
Right. The number of people plays a role too. For instance, one of the mindsets that is actively imposed is to reduce the number of people. However, reducing the number of people turns out to be stealing from the entire humanity. It means that it doesn't mean that we'll lose those technologies which we have, but it means that we won't get new ones. Well, everything is interrelated.
The use of just primitive ones.
And everything is logical. If we do not fulfill our main function or our mission, it means we are sort of inefficient. If we are inefficient and do not develop, who will allow us? Or who will give us new technologies, new knowledge and skills, so to speak? That's natural.
Igor Mikhailovich, you once said that if people start telling the truth, and in particular scientists start telling the truth, it would significantly change the world.
Of course, it would.
It seems to me that now is the time when...
Literally, in a recent video, you and I had a conversation about subpersonalities. After all, this is reality. And those people who encountered or studied, well, I'll just repeat it and remind our friends that EEG taken of a child and of an adult are absolutely different things. An adult brain cannot function like a child's brain, and vice versa. But this is actually noted. It's a violation of all, let's say, all the canons of not just medicine, physics, but of everything else. However, that exists. That's the point. And this is being silenced. Would it be important to people, in your opinion? In my opinion, it is very important for people. Why? Because it's a clear understanding of where a person will be. If only we were able to implement the project that we started. But unfortunately, the current situation in our country, let's say, has shut it down. Yet, in that project, we could also demonstratively get to those subpersonalities with public exposure, you see? And could make it possible to talk to people who died a long time ago. That would be very interesting.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, but indeed, a lot of people encounter, well, in the case of Billy Milligan, for example, a bunch of specialists guided to unmask a charlatan. But they all came to the conclusion that yes, that was true. And the man was acquitted because it wasn't Billy who committed the crimes, but his other personalities. However, there are a lot of such cases around the world.
A great lot.
A lot. And about this, well, is it being studied or not? Or do they just turn a blind eye and keep quiet about it?
In the majority of cases, they turn a blind eye. They just attribute everything to split consciousness. Or there are some other excuses. You know, again, I'll tell you in this way. In medicine, especially in psychiatry, the first one to put on a medical gown is the doctor.
Right.
Well, that's true. As a matter of fact, in any modern science, you can twist everything you want, while in medicine and psychiatry, you can prove whatever you want, you know, if you are interested in it. But there's the truth. There is a reality that no one can escape, and for some reason, it is silenced. Why? We've already discussed this. It is scary, it is destructive to a lot of institutions and so on. It will fundamentally change our lives. Well, no one wants to change it. In the consumerist format, this is really bad. While on the other hand, this is also bad for people. And what is the real scale of activity of those subpersonalities? It's enormous, my friends. Everyone, if they haven't encountered it themselves, has repeatedly seen it in their relatives, loved ones, friends, and the like. When, for example, a group of 10 people gets together, it cannot happen that there is no one with the activity of a subpersonality. It's true after all.
Do people see that in a group?
They do.
Can they see this manifestation in another person?
Yes, they can. It is observed. Many people notice it in themselves, but it's not customary to talk about this when they have some manifestation in themselves. People get scared. When it becomes really obtrusive, they have to go to psychiatrists, get treatment, and so on. Otherwise, who will confess it? No one wants to be pointed a finger at. You see? Or to be considered a defective person. That's why so many things are hushed up. Friends, really, who among us haven't seen such manifestations? When you sit and talk to a normal person, and he sort of instantly changes. His eyes expression is different, his face is different, he is different in general. He sort of hasn't changed, but he is different. You feel that he is different, and he starts speaking out of place or something completely different. Or a nice, kind man was sitting, and in an instant, he is already sitting like an animal. Why? Where has it come from? An instant passes and he changes back again.
The snap of a finger.
Of course. Who hasn't encountered that? And there are so many people who simply dream about this phenomenon after listening to various fairy tales. When a subpersonality manifests in someone and endows them with a certain gift, he becomes talented. He doesn't even have to study. He knows everything, you see? I mean, he has such understanding and knowledge of languages, whatever, of other sciences and that very business. When he is prompted, told various things, and led through life, a lot of people say, I wish I had that, but we get what we pay for, because we ourselves direct this desire into the system.
Igor Mikhailovich, people really envy such, let's say, results, such genius,
Yes.
and such education or something else of another person. But what are the consequences for a person himself in whom a subpersonality manifests? Can this symbiosis of a subpersonality and a person be positive?
You see, whether it is positive or not depends on how you look at it. If you look at it from the perspective of our ordinary, but now three-dimensional life and the like, of course, it can. But again, it's like an additional consciousness with expanded capabilities for a person. It's not hard for him to invent or make up something, or whatever, right? I mean, there are really hints. Again, subpersonality perceives the world in a completely different way. It has no problem stopping a person and saying, don't go around a corner of a house, for example, or stopping a person. Say, he is just walking and suddenly hears an order. Your shoelaces are untied. The person starts to look where his shoelaces are untied. He thinks, no, they are tied. It seemed to me. And when he starts going around a corner, he hears a brick falling down. It is literally an instant. For subpersonality, it's not a problem.
To save the life of its carrier.
Of course, if it benefits subpersonality.
Igor Mikhailovich, people also describe the following situations. Let's suppose people suddenly ask you, how long will it take you to get there? What time should we expect you? A person says, I answer automatically in 17 minutes. And then I trace a chain of thoughts. Why 17 minutes? How do I know? How long does it take to get there? Will there be any traffic jams? And so on. And so he reaches the place, looks at his watch, and actually notes that it took 17 minutes. What is this?
17.
Is this the work of secondary consciousness, or are those actually hints from subpersonality?
It's a subpersonality. In this case, it is tritely a subpersonality. Secondary consciousness will not be able to calculate that. Why? Yes. It is connected to the system, yes, but its function is much lower and its capabilities are, let's say, much lower than those of a subpersonality. For subpersonality, it's not a problem to look up your itinerary and to calculate everything, and the intellectual capabilities of subpersonality are much higher. For many of our friends, a question may immediately arise. Why don't we, if we exploited them, we could change the world? You have to remember, my friends, that subpersonalities are the dead, and they have one goal, to eat. They simply have no other goal.
When you once said in a video about this, in consciousness of many people, a question arose. After all, they are relatives and close people. I don't know, they are mothers who lost children or children who lost their parents. And they certainly have bright memories of some episodes here in life when...
Of course, they remember the living relatives and close people.
Yes, they remember them in a good context.
Sure.
And it's very difficult to realize that subpersonalities are actually deprived of everything moral and ethical.
Yes.
When they are already on that side, that
They know, they feel their relatives, they understand what they are doing, but they will do it anyway.
Will they really deprive their near and dear person of life?
They will. If they have such an opportunity to take the life of their closest relative whom they insanely loved during their lifetime, or would easily give their own life for him or her, after becoming a subpersonality, if such a subpersonality has an opportunity to take life, it will take it without thinking, instantly. Okay, let me share such an example for understanding, friends. You and your relatives, your loved ones, your dearest people, decide to go for a walk. It is winter. There's ice on the river with a fast current. Everyone is walking around. Your family and friends decide to take a walk, and you too. The ice seems to be solid, everything seems to be fine, but right under you it collapses. You fall into the water, you try to get out, you grab onto the ice, but it breaks, and you feel that you are being carried away under the ice. You realize that one more instant, and you'll be pulled into this abyss, into this darkness. But here, on the ice, your family and friends are standing. Won't you be grabbing onto their feet? A simple question.
Like a life-saving straw.
Of course, you will. And who and you will be doing that? After all, you are putting your relatives under a threat. And now look at the situation we have here. Okay, you seem to be putting your family and friends under threat, but on the other hand, it's a chance for you to survive because you cannot grab onto the ice, and you are being carried away by the current.
I also remember how you said that here a person experiences this emotion of fear and panic for 90 seconds, for as long as this chemical reaction is running.
Of course.
While there, people are constantly in this state, the state of panic, the state of fear.
This is an oppressed
And they
state.
understand perfectly well that this is their only chance to relieve pain,
Certainly.
to have at least some kind of life. Igor Mikhailovich, it so happens when you once said that subpersonalities influence a person.
They do.
It seemed to me that it happens at those moments when a person recalls subpersonalities and transmits powers to them.
No, let's take a look at some families who haven't heard of that or who doesn't know such families. For example, there lived a good family with many children. One person dies, and literally, a month or two later, the second person dies, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and it is as if scripted.
Yes.
Within a year, half of the relatives may die. The question is, why? Because the first person who passed away became a fairly strong subpersonality, and he starts dragging others after himself. Well, it is not always that people must necessarily die and leave after him. How much evil does a subpersonality do? People start getting sick, everything begins to fall apart and collapse. A lot of problems arise. Again, people become annoyed. They lose sleep, It's all like one thing on top of another. Yes, there isn't an excuse here. We lost a near and dear person. We went through stress. That's why a lot of diseases emerged. They did emerge, but oftentimes, it's just a hungry creature. Yes, we want it to be a loving, good person, but a loving, good person is being pulled under the ice. He is scared, he's in pain, and he is grabbing onto the living. He is trying to get rid of the pain and the horror he is in. That's the reason why it all actually happens. Because of this, grabbing onto the living. And whom does subpersonality remember and feel the best? After all, subpersonality operates by different criteria, and even those small, sensory interrelations play for it the role of, let's say, that straw, which it grasps at, and can reach its relatives and loved ones. As a rule, these are relatives and close people or very close friends, where people have some kind of interrelation, let's say, a more solid one than with the rest of people, because it would be hard to reach a stranger or someone, let's say, you don't consider him or her your family and friends, while relatives are precisely the first to suffer. Unfortunately, but it's true. Why are we sharing this? The main reason we are sharing this is so that people would work on themselves and understand that their death is a problem, not just for themselves, but it is also a problem for their relatives and friends. While we still live here, we can change a lot. We can at least attain peace. That's already a lot. We will already protect our family and friends from ourselves, really like from a vampire, because we won't be eating them. Even this is worth it.
Right, a true care for one's fellow human being and for oneself.
Of course. Why? There is one more problem. Human consciousness excludes the understanding of death as such. And a human is unaware. He understands only theoretically that he will die, but he doesn't believe in this. Consciousness excludes it. Experiments of this kind have been conducted, and this was studied.
Yes, quite right. Israeli medics check the brain activity. Consciousness absolutely doesn't want to perceive death in any
Refuses.
way to correlate it with a person. It simply refuses to perceive its own death.
Of course. And this unwillingness of our consciousness is what actually makes people, so to say, non-believers, selfish, lazy, and so forth. And people do not care about their after-death fate until they face it. Unfortunately, this is true.
Igor Mikhailovich, but what if our viewers also describe the following situations? When a woman is, let's say, at work, and suddenly some pictures pop up in her consciousness. Some places she definitely doesn't know. Dialogues of people she definitely doesn't know. And this happens from time to time. What is that? What is this phenomenon?
Anything can happen. As psychologists or psychiatrists say, our brain is able to compose something out of fragments, draw something, and so on, meaning to fill in the voids that are not filled. Let's put it that way. We are capable of recalling things we accidentally saw somewhere in the window while traveling or on TV, and so on. But all these are merely excuses by those people who cannot really explain what's going on and why our brain draws these pictures for us. Everything is very, very simple. When we, virtually most people, switch to such a state of slumber, cartoons start appearing before our eyes, pictures appear, and a person as if falls into a certain state and finds himself in certain places, in a city, in nature, it doesn't matter. But for him as personality, these places are completely unfamiliar. He can hear people's conversations, he can sort of participate in those conversations, or he can really be in some places, in that very nature. However, he as personality realizes that he has never seen this, never talked to anyone and so forth.
Yes.
He has never been there and never had anything to do with this at all. This is 100% a subpersonality, its manifestation and its memories.
I remember you once said that in this way, subpersonality agitates and staggers personality.
Of course.
That it wants to
Of course.
accumulate strength in this way.
But at this time, it devours our attention, our life, and becomes stronger. And every time it becomes stronger, it will increase its influence on us. That's already an active subpersonality. If a person doesn't have active subpersonalities, he practically has no such phenomena. What he has seen and what he needs emerges in his head, and he doesn't have such pictures that cannot be explained with anything. Simply none. There is a complete absence of them. But when a person has such fantasy-like or imposed pictures, or let's say, even obsessive ones, a certain dream that repeats every day, one and the same.
With frequency.
Yes, with a certain frequency. That's 100% subpersonality. We notice them in ourselves, but sometimes we just do not want to believe that we are being eaten too. And there are so many situations when, without any reason at all, a person suddenly starts feeling unwell. You understand that the weather hasn't changed. Nothing is happening. You haven't taken anything, you don't seem to be sick, but your condition is so wrecked as if someone has squeezed you out, as if you've been working all day long. But excuse me, you haven't done anything yet, but you're already sort of depleted, so to say. At this moment, it's enough for you to simply lie back and relax. Just relax and observe what's going on in consciousness, and you will see fragmented pictures in the literal sense of the word. You will feel that someone is as if living in parallel with you. There is someone there. You are not alone in the same space. How many times have we felt that? Again, why are some people afraid of walking at night? It is clear that we can see something with our peripheral vision, or something else. Most often we feel. There's one more pattern. Why is night the most acceptable time for third forces, at least not for subpersonalities, but for third forces, to attack a person? By the way, for subpersonality, it is easier after sunset than while the sun is in the sky. When the moon is bright, it's worse.
Yes, it's true, the guna of ignorance. As they also say in some Eastern religions, This is that very evening time.
Yes.
Why is it exactly at this time that subpersonalities manifest and become active in a human?
Well, I'll put it this way. If we consider it from the standpoint of energies, the photon load intensity is much less.
Again, the ALLATRA
The
physics.
space is rarefied. Banal physics. Banal one. Okay? I agree. It's not banal physics. Banal physics won't explain that.
Primordial physics.
Primordial
Yes.
physics will explain it. I agree.
Right. Igor Mikhailovich, there are the following situations. For example, four people are sitting and talking. They have a dialogue. And the next day, when they suddenly come back to that dialogue, to what they were discussing, one of them doesn't remember a fragment of the meeting at all, a fragment of the conversation. What is that? Was a person simply focused on something of his own, or was it a substitution?
Look, it is one thing when the four of us are sitting. I mean, our friend, the two of us, and someone else. And for example, our friend is telling us something. The two of you memorize it, but I don't. That's normal. I've been in my thoughts, I could miss the dialogue and not hear it. It is much more amusing when, for example, there's our third interlocutor who is with us, and our fourth friend. We are having a conversation, and our friend starts telling us something, arguing and explaining. The three of us hear that. The next day we meet, and he brings this topic up again, or someone brings it up. And we say, yesterday you said this, but he totally rejects it and says, no, I didn't say that. That didn't happen, and he doesn't remember it. Or he remembers that. For instance, he insulted us, but he says, no, I said it gently and delicately. What is that?
Partial activation of a subpersonality.
Of course.
He remembers that moment a little bit.
100%, with a slight substitution, and that happens far and wide. But if a person often encounters such situations and would go to medical doctors, doctors would give a rather disappointing diagnosis, which has nothing to do with the situation. This person simply needs to actively engage in his spiritual development, strengthen himself as personality, and become stronger than the subpersonality, which already begins to seize power over him.
Yet, what should people who are around a person do if they see, for example, that he changed at a given second, that he was sort of their near and dear person, but then all of a sudden there is someone else in him?
You know, this is a difficult question. To be honest, nothing can be done about that. How can we influence the choice of a person himself? There is only one remedy. Personality should intensively develop. It should control everything. First of all, its position in this particular energy structure. Personality's position should be dominant, but not
At
slavish.
least we ourselves should be in feelings and should not give in.
Of course. If one's personality is in slavery to one's consciousness, it is very easy for subpersonality to take over. If personality is mature, if a person follows the spiritual path, no subpersonality and nothing else can threaten it. Today, we have suddenly come down to subpersonality again.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich,
But the topic is acute, I understand.
it is very acute because people sort of know nothing about the structure of a human. They know nothing about themselves.
Tatiana, you know, what I'll tell you, as of today, everything we know about a human being is less than 5%. We do not know 95% about a human at all, how he is arranged, who he is, and what he is, what his role is. We know nothing at all. All we know is what comes from our studies of a little bit of anatomy, a little bit of psychology. We have observed a human for centuries. We have described all this, and we believe that we know something about a human. No, my friends, we know nothing about a human. Human capabilities are enormous, really. Thank God we don't know about these capabilities. But it is very bad that we don't know other capabilities. Those which we should really implement in this life. Why? We are born is not a happenstance either. Let's be honest. We actually win a huge competition among millions of contenders. It is exactly us who win. And then we just give this life to Satan instead of gaining true life. In fact, all of us are already winners. All of us are chosen here. But nevertheless, we do not fulfill our mission. Yes, I understand. There are substitutions, distortions of knowledge, or something else, but we actually feel that. We know it. Why do we not develop in ourselves our original feelings and understandings, which are embedded in us as personalities? After all, they resonate. They are understandable. But no, we listen to our consciousness. As personalities, we actually know that consciousness is deceitful, that it is precisely Shaitan. And haven't we been warned that Shaitan is powerful and that he is in us? We have been warned. We know it. But we don't believe in this. Why? Because, a simple question, why do we not believe in Shaitan? That's a good question, isn't it? So when we do not believe in Shaitan, we do not believe in God either. Yet, why do we not believe in them? Just because Shaitan lives instead of us at this time. I mean, we are so weak and degraded as personalities that we give even our divine services and our prayers to Shaitan. And he does that instead of us. In other words, we do not live, and this is also true. Why? Because a human is not that active thinking inside oneself. As we were taught, I think, therefore I am, and the like.
I also remember how you once said that when a person addresses and calls upon this great intuition inside himself, which is actually subpersonality, he basically cultivates in himself
A killer.
a killer.
Yes.
And he gives strength to the one who manifests itself now in order for it to become stronger and be even crueler in the next life than in its current version.
Of course. Do you know what the scariest thing is? Again, many people, even those who are familiar with subpersonalities, who studied that a long time ago, don't understand a simple thing. After all, if you have nurtured your own killer within yourself, you'll be in slavery to him, probably for thousands and thousands of years. Why? Because subpersonality becomes your master.
There in that hierarchy.
Of course, it becomes stronger. And if it has manifested in you, no matter how many subpersonalities there were, this one will be the master, because it dominates the living personality. It means it will further dominate living personalities. It will evolve, and you will observe and live in that world, or rather exist in that world where there is, how to put it, this dominant master, or a tyrant, to put it simply. And you will be under that tyranny. Not only is the situation bad, but you will also be manipulated. You will have to, and will pay tribute, meaning you will aggravate your condition even more. That's the way the world is arranged, and this has to be studied.
Igor Mikhailovich, in one of the videos you actually said, it was in the video when we talked about these manifestations, that when a subpersonality accumulates strength,
Right.
that's exactly when it can communicate with other subpersonalities. Our guys also came up with the following questions. Does it happen within one carrier? Or will subpersonalities that were together some time ago and probably committed some atrocities be able to meet after a certain period of time in a new generation and continue to destroy this world?
You know, I'll answer this way. Yes, they can. And there are examples of that. Again, we have to return to Anand. They studied there and trained people. And when we already recall the trial over them, some high-ranking officials in their hierarchy laughed at the trial, and they were absolutely not afraid of anything. Do you know why? Because those high-ranking officials were part of a certain circle of people who were involved in accumulating power and the like, who used secret practices, so to say. What did those practices give them? They learned how to operate and accumulate the energy of vril. Naturally, they understood that after death, they would be dominant subpersonalities. And after their physical death, they would be able to take over personalities anyway. Moreover, they would be able to connect with each other. Is it possible? It is. Yes, it is possible.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, although we have ended up discussing the topic of subpersonalities, Our topic today clearly correlates with the Creative Society project. I will explain why. Because when you look at some parts of our world that we live in, you realize that certain regions resemble simply a hell on earth. A hell that has been created by humans themselves.
Right.
And there was always a question: how could humans come to the point of creating this particular scenario on the planet? Why is it not a paradise on Earth, where everyone would be happy? Why was it necessary to bring certain regions of the world to such a deplorable state that...
The majority of regions, in fact, let's put it this way. Do people have freedom, real freedom here? No. Are they the masters of their own lives? Well, within certain limits. You know, I'll put it this way, like a cockroach in a jar. You have freedom within a jar, but not more. Isn't that true, friends? I would also like to mention the following point. We have just talked about a group of those individuals. And what do we see nowadays? A huge surge in this topic. Smart people will understand, whereas fools don't need this. These are facts that are confirmed.
It turns out that these subpersonalities have a much greater influence than a person expects. You know, people are actually more afraid of the living than of the dead, aren't
Well,
they?
people should be afraid of some living ones too, especially those who are controlled by the dead, such as the world. And unfortunately, this is true.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, precisely at such moments you realize how important it is for humanity to have this spiritual core. Those are the people who not just convey the truth, but who surely live by this truth,
That's the point.
who nurture this life inside themselves.
You know, let's say, is it possible to change this world? It is possible. But only those who really love God can change it. Why? Because only the light can confront the darkness. And everyone who truly loves God, really and honestly, not in words and not for neighbors, but from the bottom of his heart, that's already a person who changes the world for the better. I'll put it mildly and accurately, and that person has a beautiful future. In fact, we have two options, and we have talked about this more than once. Let's not delve into this topic. Why? Because we cannot tell the truth, but we have hinted today at that truth and that reality which really exists in this world. The smart ones will understand for themselves what we have told you in our pauses. I'll put it this way.
Between the lines.
Between the lines. Right. So, if we do not bring this world back to the alive, there will be the second scenario. And it is fair.
Therefore, there has to be many more of the alive ones.
Right.
There has to be plenty of life.
Whereas life is love,
Yes,
right?
it is the most tremendous power.
So, my friends, let's simply start with love for one another. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Igor Mikhailovich.
You know, honestly, friends, these are interesting topics. I understand that they captivate you, but we are very, very limited in our ability to convey this information to you. Why? Because we are forced to be silent, unfortunately, about many things.
But you know, Igor Mikhailovich, another peculiarity of the ALLATRA movement participants is that even within the framework of a project, when you give just a hint and speak about something that we want to do, and there is no need to finish your sentence, because everyone understands it very well at some non-verbal level, so...
Do you know why? Because love unites.
It does.
Thank you, friends.